I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Oh, so I was saying, I appreciate Black Power Media being mentioned because I definitely would want all of you to follow up and check out our work. It's not just me, it's a whole collective of us from a variety of different perspectives, having a little fun, debating, getting into some deep politics, movement work, et cetera, and so forth. And we would love to have all of you participate, engage, et cetera. So please do consider doing that. A big thanks, first of all, to Professor Alexander and Professor June for this invitation and their big time help in helping arrange everything and getting me here. I really appreciate the invitation and the chance to be here, and I appreciate the work that goes into that. So I titled this presentation, Stay Away from Dr. Ball, He Radicalizes Students. The Academic Paradox and Notes from the Margins. Long title, but as I was asked to come here and talk, given what I understood to be the context of the role of the relationship between the academic and social justice, I couldn't help but reflect on what continues to be an issue for me at my institution, quite frankly. And something that just kept coming up over and over and over again from a variety of perspectives and places was that phrase, including most recently a former president of our Student Government Association contacted me after graduation and saying, Dr. Ball, I just wanted to say I appreciate your work. I never had a chance to take you as a student when I was there, but quite frankly, the president of the university pulled me aside one day and said, stay away from Dr. Ball, he radicalizes students.
That's why we brought you here.
So I've always said that's a goal. I do introduce every semester saying the same thing, more or less. My goal is to turn you into a revolutionary in 16 weeks. That's my bias. That's where I'm coming from. And I at least feel like out of respect to the student, to my colleagues and comrades, that everybody should know where we stand. And out of respect and in honor of somebody like Dhoruba bin Wahad, who has said very plainly, outside of strategy and tactics, everything should be on the table. Dhoruba bin Wahad, by the way, one of my favorite living philosopher and political scientist, former member of the Black Liberation Army and Black Panther Party, former political prisoner, someone, if you don't already, you should get to know. And in fact, the fact that we deal with in our organizational, that is our platform work so much around political prisoners is, I should just want to say from the jump that we do that because it's a reminder of how unfree we are and how much of social justice and work still needs to be done. So the fact that he would still be here as a former political prisoner, the fact that people like Mumia Abu-Jamal are still locked up, Leonard Peltier is still locked up, David Gilbert just got out, Marshall Eddie Conway got out just to live about 10 good years and do great work, and then he just passed away. Mutulu Shakur just got out. But Veronza Bowers and many others are still locked up. So please check out Prison Radio, Freedom Archives, the Jericho Movement, and learn about who these people are if you're not already familiar and why they're locked up. Because as I said already, the conditions we face today, they are imprisoned for trying to get rid of. And the fact that they're not a regular part of our discussion is part of the reason why so many of our movements and efforts are not advancing in the way that many of us would like. So anyway, as I said, I started off I just will run through a couple of things, and if anybody would like, we can come back and talk more about any of them. But as I was saying about the title of this thing, that I'm a little bit of a cliche, and I love the fact that age was mentioned because I felt very much like crossing over into 50 and now 51. I don't know if it's a psychological thing that we're encouraged to in terms of society, but it's a time to reflect and reassess, and it's like, what has my impact been, et cetera, and so forth. And I feel like I am a little bit of a cliche in the sense that I used to think I was about to be on the precipice of bringing about revolution. And I was like, I'm going into the academic world because I have one little hustle to work, and it'll allow me the time to do the other work, and then bam, it'll be on. And then over time, the engagement with academia takes effect. The engagement with political struggle takes effect. Age takes effect. The self-critical recognition of what is and is not effective takes effect. And longer story short, I realized, as it relates to the university and much about the larger political world, much of my efforts have not led to the conclusions I once thought that they would, or hoped that they would. And in terms of the institution where I work, I have to be straight up, as I'll talk a little bit about here. As that old phrase and song goes, I fought the law and the law won. I took an L. The fact of my tenure and full professor status has allowed me to stay, but in terms of my engagement with the institution and what I had hoped to have that engagement mean, I took an L. But I kept hearing that phrase, the exact same phrase, whether from students, whether from other faculty, whether from admin telling me directly off the record. Everybody was saying the same thing. Dr. Ball radicalizes students. And in fact, one gave me the phrase I quote more often than anything else, and this is a direct quote. He said, "Dr. Ball, your problem is you want to create new knowledge, and we don't do that here. Your job is to create menial laborers for the communications industry." End quote. So as somebody who was always critical of the communications world, or the world created, or the environment that is created by, intentionally by our media environment, I didn't want to create people who would become menial laborers for that. I wanted to create people who were critical thinkers looking to destroy or negate what was being done by that media environment. So that set us on a course and a path of constant ongoing conflict that even as of this week has taken another little passive-aggressive turn. So I say that to say, just from the beginning, that just like in the real world, academia has been, I think, mythologized into this place where academics and radicals are supposed to be able to gather, do this work, and either they slip off into the ivory tower, as is often said, or they become part of part of the people's struggle. But my point of bringing that up is that what is not considered is that, much like the outside world or the rest of the world, academic world is part of an institutional apparatus. It is part of a political project. It is not designed to produce radicals and revolutionaries any more than you would find in any other field or any other profession. Part of the mythology is that it does do that, or it's supposed to do that, and we who want to be connected to those struggles are supposed to be reflective of that and bring that out to the streets. But that takes intention to be what I'll get to in a moment, a guerrilla intellectual. Or as Dr. Joy James talks about, the redistribution of resources from the institution to the community, which is what our goal should be and which the institution never wants to happen. So there will be conflict, is my point. I was naive even in my own political analysis, knowing this intellectually. Experiencing my own analysis made me naive. Hence what I say about this growth or age or naive recognition of what I had hoped would happen not happening. So this is why I teach it, by the way, at Morgan State University, which is known as a historically black college and university, which has its own separate specific set of mythologies. So if anybody is interested in following up on any of that, I have a project called Not a Different World. I don't know if anybody's of an age that way would remember A Different World. But the project is called Not a Different World because it deals with the mythology that has often been encouraged that many of us should have about HBCUs and the black experience there. But just a couple of things going on very quickly that I think will speak to this, of what I'm trying to get to here. Just a quick overview. Recently, I was part of a group of, I was a very small part of an already growing movement of people trying to unionize faculty in Maryland, in the state of Maryland, and where we don't have the ability to organize collective bargaining rights or to unionize, so we're having to have a whole fight with the state over that. Because within the academic environment, which I was naive to once upon a time, there are these, I mentioned I'm a full professor, that is an increasingly rare breed within the academic world. Many people that you will encounter as students are faculty that are forced off of tenure track positions, they're adjuncting, they're lecturing, they're piecemealing careers through appointments at various universities at very low pay because these institutions are trying to suppress labor costs and produce more and more that will support existing institutions of power. Critical thinking, so areas in what we have in what was called the College of Liberal Arts, social sciences, humanities, all of that, all those areas are being underfunded, defunded, collapsed, exploded. My beloved Black Studies is becoming pieced off, collapsed into other fields, other departments. In particular, the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University under the original founding directorship of the late, great Dr. James Turner, that has unfortunately been forced back into the College of Liberal Arts, losing its own autonomy as part of a backlash against critical thinking. There have been strikes. Some of you are probably aware of that. I'm not even sure what has happened at this particular campus, but my comrade Dylan Rodriguez was supporting the strike at UC Riverside. Students and faculty trying to get more redistribution of resources. We have an increasing military influence over campuses. The increase in funding to STEM, cybersecurity, that is science, technology, engineering, and math fields, which, although he disagrees with me on this, my colleague, Dr. Jelani Favors, in his book on the history of historically Black colleges and universities, he actually details a section where post-Black power and civil rights, there was an intentional redistribution of funds away from, as I was saying, liberal arts and critical thinking, areas of critical thinking, into STEM, specifically with the idea that this would prevent and limit the amount of critical thought that young people would engage in, making them therefore less likely to become radical. This is happening all over the place. I mentioned the struggle over Black studies. I was just reading an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education about what's going on over the last couple of years and the rates of no confidence votes that faculty have taken up against administration, that faculty have increasingly taken up against entire administrations, not just a single administrator, with the idea that faculty rights are being dwindled away, the ability to engage in shared governance, the ability to have academic freedom and to raise questions and to engage in critical thought. Again, all driven to where, as I'll start to actually shift here and then move to even a conclusion, all here to defend, or all geared and designed to defend the actual role and function of these institutions and what is actually happening in this society. So we heard the beautiful invocation about indigenous folks from the beginning. We've heard reference to the struggles of African descended people in this country as it continues on in this world, in this country and in this world. Much of it relates to the fact that this and the academic structure that has emerged institutionally is here to defend the colonial origins of this society and the colonialism and the relationships that are born out of colonialism that exist to this day. And by now, just to explain myself a little further, just to simplify the phrase or the term colonialism, I think it is important to recognize that this is not a democracy. Democracies don't create, or I just had a, my field of study that I technically degreed in, communication studies, has a long history of being funded and developed by the political and military and economic elite of the society, specifically to shape public opinion and create psychological warfare and propaganda, specifically, even as they've said in their own documents, to take the struggles of of colonial repression from overseas back here to the United States, to create, again, new identities, new explanations for inequality, to literally redefine democracy as capitalism or capitalism as democracy, so that people feel like engaging in capitalism is some sort of performance of freedom, to create whites out of various European groups, Black Americans out of African-descended peoples, enslaved Negroes, savages, et cetera, and so forth, to redefine indigenous people by literally, as they said in their own language, as famously titled in Ward Churchill's book, Kill the Indian and Save the Man, extract all of the indigenous histories and reshape and leave this empty vessel redefined as a good Christian American. All of this has been part of not just the military and other aspects of this society, but specifically communication, the field of communications and the academic environment. To defend a colonial structure, which, as I was just about to say, is an intentional patterned arrangement where the state, meaning all existing and interrelated structures of political, economic, government, military, intelligence, extract, exploit, and abuse the labor, material, and immaterial production of African or Black people here in the US, the indigenous population still here as well, and by extension and with variation, all other groups, including even the exploitation of white workers. What is often described as neoliberalism, or I was just reading and critiquing Bernie Sanders' new book, as he wants to call it, uber capitalism. All of these euphemisms for colonial extraction or neo-colonialism are meant to confuse and redefine the environment we find ourselves in so that we can't interpret it and then respond in the way that we should. So in short, this is why we get movies like Wakanda. This is why we get the Hulu 1619 Project series or the PBS Fight the Power hip hop series all recently aired, or false memories of what the Obama presidency was supposed to have been, all to create McLuhan's fishbowl. That is Marshall McLuhan, the communications scholar who said that we don't know who discovered water, but we know it was not the fish, because an all-pervasive environment is always beyond perception. All right, so just to close, or at least to this initial presentation of disparate ideas and to open up some discussion, some back and forth, what is it that we should become? What is the role of those of us in the academy, whether we're students, faculty, et cetera, in relationship to social justice, which does in fact require a politically organized movement or series of movements if we're going to ever correct what is actually happening and in fact worsening. So in our little Black Power media environment, we talk a lot about Walter Rodney, and lately we've been talking not only about Rodney specifically, but in particular his idea around the guerrilla intellectual. So as he said of the guerrilla intellectual, quote, "Now at the same time there are possibilities. There are possibilities which perhaps when we live in the metropoles, we do not appreciate them until we go back to the third world countries from which we came." By the way, Walter Rodney, do you all know who Walter Rodney was? The great Guyanese African diasporan revolutionary who wrote most famously How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Brilliant Marxist, anti-colonial revolutionary. So forgive me for taking that assumption. When in fact when his car was blown up, what was that, 1980? Forgive me for may all the revolutionaries anyway, everybody forgive me for that. But when his car was blown up, I mean, part of the goal was to blow up his memory. And he wasn't big enough like people like Dr. King or Malcolm X, where they could kill them and then redefine them in perpetuity as against what they actually were in real life, creating these empty, silly figures and images and symbols of these people that weren't real. Anyway, so it shouldn't be a surprise, but that's who Walter Rodney was, and his work is getting some increasing attention among certain segments of academia, and certainly his work gets routine attention among many grassroots radical spaces, circles and spaces. So please do check him out. And he sort of is also popularly known for this idea of the guerrilla intellectual. That is, what is a revolutionary, the relationship between the revolutionary and academia. So as he continues here, the possibilities lie in the contradictions of this society and the fact that Marxist thought, irrespective of these things, is in fact present, and that literature is available, and that facilities for inquiry are available. And one could urge, therefore, that even within the realms of institutions that are designed to carry out a particular ideological function, it is possible to conduct a sort of guerrilla intellectual war, which one will have access not to that which by which one will have access not to that which was designed specifically for one, but access which hinges upon the dialectical tradition beyond that which was intended for one. There are many things which I believe a third world scholar can grasp in spite of the quite conscious attempt of part of all of our institutions, including those in the third world, to reformulate us to continue to program us as bourgeois thinkers. He says elsewhere, I was doing some paper on the Russian Revolution, and it struck me that this Lenin, V.I. Lenin, was a person who had tremendous capacity for intellectualizing, at the same time doing. In my own naive way, I called this phenomenon a revolutionary intellectual, but the professor was very hard on this statement. He said there's no such thing. One can be an intellectual or one can be a revolutionary. You can't combine the two. Lenin may at one time have been a revolutionary and at another time an intellectual, but the moment he moves into practical activity, he must abandon intellectualism. Rodney continues, this was a most curious argument. I just sensed that something was wrong about it, and I felt that somehow being a revolutionary intellectual might be a goal to which one might aspire, for surely there was no real reason why one should remain in the academic world, that is, remain an intellectual, and at the same time not be a revolutionary. In other words, how can you not bring about your intellectual work to have relevance for and support of and inspiration to radical political organization in people's communities in the so-called grassroots? Or as Dev Springer asks in their very powerful essay, and also in their powerful conversation with Dr. Joy James, raising these similar questions, and I'm not actually sure which one I'm reading from here, but quoting Rodney, what is the epistemic and liberatory potential of the simple act of putting true and profound knowledge of Africa and colonial history generally at the hands of the people? Actually, that's Dev's words. So in other words, how do you bring radical ideas out of these institutions into community spaces and make them relevant and supportive? Lastly, I'll end here by saying that, as Rodney said, the essential task of the guerrilla intellectual is threefold. And actually, this is Dev Springer. I'm quoting Rodney, so shout out to Dev. The essential task of the guerrilla intellectual, as Rodney conceptualized it, is threefold. First is to mend the binary dichotomy between revolutionaries and intellectuals. Second, to subvert, transform, and ultimately challenge the legitimacy of bourgeois knowledge, which is held within the white institutions. And thirdly, the production of knowledge and scholarship, which can be coupled with action used in service of black liberation. In short, as Dr. Joy James has said, redistribute resources from the university back into the community in one form or another. And I'll stop there. In the words of Fred Hampton, to you I say peace, only if you're willing to fight for it. So I did want to stop there. I did want to rush through because I wanted to leave some room for some comments, some criticism, some maybe a particular point anyone would want to elaborate or have me elaborate on, or to challenge anything for clarification. Also, you know, as a longtime professor, I'm used to reading vibes and audiences. Yes, in the back.
I wonder if you've seen the recent Netflix series, The Family, about the power of evangelists
I have.
in controlling the entire universe, not the United States.
Right.
They cut the teeth as an anti-union group, and then it was just a depiction against, Russian expansionism, and we rehabilitated Nazis. Always came. Now they control these evangelists. Every president since Eisenhower has had to go and kiss their ring, and labels like Democrat and Republican and all that have become meaningless. They control everything that we do, including education.
So not only had I seen the series called The Family on Netflix, but I had actually read at least a good portion of the book when it came out initially some years ago by Jeff Shatlett, I think was the author, right? For those who don't know, it's about what is called The Family, a group of evangelical Christians who have whittled all that has been already whittled down to the Bible into one little book called Jesus, which they use to basically just whittle everything as much down as possible so that they can explain how more or less white manifest destiny is real, and they use this manipulation of people's spirituality to impose right-wing conservative politics all over the place, and they do work intentionally behind the scenes, but they are very well known to those in power, and as was said, they are unavoidable apparently once you hit a certain level of power. What do I think about that? I think that there are a number of competing groups like that are often mythologized by students in my classes as Illuminati and all that kind of stuff. But all that they really are pockets of power who use their power to influence the world in ways that they want. It's not some mystical thing, as far as my humble opinion. It is people maybe using the ideas of mysticism or misusing the ideas of faith, et cetera, and so forth to concoct or to organize. But the reality is just wealthy, powerful people, mostly white, mostly male, mostly conservative, imperialist, and they get together and I mean, my joke with my students is, I used to bartend and, once got fired for letting my then girlfriend and friends drink for free all night at the bar. That was a conspiracy. Why would that level of conspiracy end if we're become military contractors and intelligence and high level this and high level? Why would that level end? Why would, shout out to Club U in DC, but I used to get it there for free because our buddy was the doorman and the DJ. You know what I'm saying? It was a great, brief couple years. It was wonderful. But why was it? In other words, we didn't need. I mean, we could have added some ceremony and skulls and this and that and called it this and put some robes on and done some whatever and symbols but all we would have been doing is using the power we have, pooling it and helping one another. So that's why it doesn't have to be. Anyway, sometimes the joke works better than other times, but I think you get the point. I think you get the point. Anyway, yes?
So I know you've been radical changes. I want to know some major points you're trying to express, like what type of radical changes you're trying to work on right now. Maybe you can give us some small examples.
So personally, I appreciate the question. What radical changes am I working on, if I understood the question, right? So for me personally, I'm really just trying to get people to see past certain levels of mythologies in my own work around race and economics and class, and then encourage people into some political organizational spaces where all the real answers will be developed. And that's why I'm saying I'm very Dhoruba bin Wahad on that. Like when you see me in public, I'm very much like I want redistribution, I want anti-colonial struggle, give me some socialism, some communism, whatever. I'm down for all of that. But really, I just want people to get into other organizational radical spaces, some political education spaces, off the mic, off camera, off social media. And that's where all the real solutions will be developed. But broadly speaking, I just want an end to this world as it is currently constructed. Pretty plain and simple. So I'm intentionally vague because I honestly also don't know what to do, and I don't know exactly how to get it done. I just know I want more, like Bob Marley's song, I want more, and I want everyone to want more. And once we do that, I think we can get to that next level. But I don't want to stand up here and act like, but socialism, communism, I think are good sort of directions. Pan-Africanism, I am in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Scientific socialism, communism, United States of Africa, those kinds of Nkrumah, Tereus politics. I'm very much, but it really, yeah. But if whatever will get you into whatever lane you're in, there's a radical tradition, follow it into political organization, and that's where we'll all meet with the solutions.
So you encourage open mind, like, make a change?
I mean, we have to have certain levels of an open mind, but I am, a little bit more dogmatic in certain areas. Like, I don't want to be too open now. Like, we just had a beef with some folks that wanted to march with Tucker Carlson and Ron Paul and all of them. I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. All right? But, yeah.
You are in control of education in this country.
I'm sorry?
You are in control of education in this country. What would you do to re-educate the black people, African Americans, especially the youth, that you talk about being dispersing? What would you do?
If I was in charge of education, what would I do to re-educate black people?
What would you do, and what's your state of the education of the youth coming up?
Wow. To be honest with you, the first thing I thought of is I would do things like double, triple, quadruple teacher salaries, cut teaching loads of faculty at higher. Okay, wait, hold on. But I'm saying, because honestly, before you get to anything of curriculum, if you want good teaching to occur, the pressure on people teaching got to go down. Yep. Like I'm on a 4-4. I'm a tenured full professor. 20 years in the game, 20 plus. So that's interesting. You chose that job. Oh, that's really interesting. So that's deep. That's another rabbit hole. So I don't agree with you on any of that. I don't agree with any of that. This idea that I chose this. Or, so let me say.
I understand you're trying to, okay, money, right? So you need more money. Tell me why how is this going to help the youth and education?
But you have to.
He's about to do that. Let's let him.
I just watched this KRS thing. I'm a philosopher. I think very deeply. So sometimes.
Can we get for 63 cents?
That was not. I like that. Stick around for my fourth quarter free throw, though. All right? We're going to do KRS bars all day. Now, so first of all, let's be clear. I wasn't just saying I want more money. In fact, what I started to say was I wanted less teaching load so that I could be more effective in the classroom. I want teachers to have a higher salary so that they are less stressed in their life and can do better in the classroom. I want classroom sizes to go down so we don't have 50 kids, black, white, or other, piled up in a room with one. I did that as a high school teacher briefly as well. That doesn't work. You can't put me in a room with anyone in a room with 30 kids fresh off of this and that and say fix that and teach that. Be an expert. So we have to start there. Then I would just reorder the curriculum around some of the ideas and themes that I talked about here today. Let's have some political education in all of this. Let's put some context on all this. Let's revise this grand narrative that has been proved demonstrably false about the United States, about the history of race, about the history of class. Let's do all of that. And then let's see what happens. So that's my point. Like, I don't need or desire to have some Jared Ball figures out steps 1 through 100. I'm saying we need to put people in the right position and context for them to succeed.
You're saying your basis is you want to be raised up politically instead of STEM education, math.
I didn't say that either. No, I didn't say that either. What I said specifically was, that was slick. I see where I can see it. That was slick, but that's not what I said. All right, but everybody, let's be clear about what I said. Hold on. Check it though. Stop talking and check it though, because you missed it the first time. You ready? What I said was that STEM was being encouraged specifically to teach people not to think critically. I didn't say anything about.
Hey, brother, you gotta give time for him to answer, because we have other people who wanna answer questions too.
All right, my bad.
Yeah, there could be a.
So
conversation later.
so this is what I like about what's happening here is that this is actually something that I bring up in my classroom all the time, particularly when I'm talking about propaganda, psychological warfare, shaping public opinion. I'm not interested in your interpretation of, or I'm less interested in what people think about the impact of the messaging. I'm more interested in people's recognition of the initial intent. So same thing here. I'm not here to debate you or anyone on anything really, but certainly not on the issue of does STEM prepare people, black people in particular, more for the economy and critical thinking, et cetera, and so forth. What I'm saying is the intent behind an increase in funding for STEM was that those in power wanted to reduce the critical thinking among black people so that they would become less radically politicized and less threatening. So if we put that in conjunction with things like the fifth tenet of the counterintelligence program that was stated specifically to make sure black youth are not introduced to radical ideas, and maybe fill in some other dots along the way, we could start to maybe have a different understanding about what is necessary here and say, again, it's not that STEM is of no use, it's to say that it has been encouraged for a very particular political reason. And I think we should address that, or at least acknowledge it, maybe look into that a little bit.
Okay, good question. How would you educate?
We got another question.
Listen to your podcast a little bit last time. I ain't gonna lie, I got about 20 more minutes left.
All right? Oh, on the Bernie Sanders, okay.
Yeah. And then on the ride over here, this little conversation we was having, called a question. What do you think about black capitalism as a way to black freedom?
So I'm very Fred Hampton on that. No, let me not do that. Let me not do that. Remember what Fred Hampton, because I'm not that. Let me step back. Fred Hampton did though say that he thought it would be necessary and of value to beat a black capitalist to death with a copy of the Black Panther Party newspaper. I am with Abram Harris on this, at least, actually I'm not with him. Abram Harris, the black economist, said 100 years ago that black capitalists are the greatest threats and violent exploiters of black people. I wouldn't go that far, but I get his point. His point was simply that they parade themselves as doing something good for black people, but are engaged in a black capitalist process that by definition is a non-starter. So if capitalism can't even work for white folks in a white supremacist, capitalist, colonialist society, why then would people at the exact opposite end of that structure think that they could use the same thing? So a lot of what my work has been focused on these last several years has been the history of the messaging around promoting this as a response to black people organizing and becoming too radical. So on the one hand, I'm not saying that if you're engaged in black business, you're automatically the enemy. I'm simply saying that black business is not the solution to black economic inequality. So as long as those 2 points are understood to be separate, I mean, I'm relatively okay. But my biggest problem is when people argue that the solution to black people's problems is being better or more financially literate, when there's a demonstrable history that shows that this is not possible. So for instance, one of my favorite statistics that I was just, again, a small part of bringing to I guess a greater platform, is that from 1992 to 2012, black people in the United States created more than 2 million businesses. And the collective capture of national sales revenue by those businesses went down from what was already under 1% to 0.3%. And for a variety of reasons, including black businesses target black communities that don't have any money. You can already start to see the problem there. They can't get outside venture capital to expand, even if they did get more of the market that they're targeting. So as we see over and over and over and over again, the goal simply becomes get big enough till somebody white and bigger buys you. While they go on the way up, they're saying, buy black, support black. Ooh, we're all black. And then as soon as they can, they sell it to the first and mostly white biggest buyer they can get. And then all the redistribution that they promise is gone. So that's why I'm saying we need something else.
So you said like Deion Sanders.
Deion Sanders, I mean, if I could have gotten people to bet me, I would have been much richer. I said, look at what he's doing. He is the blueprint. He was following all of the blueprint. Blaming black people for the conditions of black people. What's wrong with our schools? Let's do better, black people. Come here, give me your money, give me your support, give me your support. Oh, Colorado's calling? Okay. So, yes.
In your conversation about STEM, and which is a scientific endeavor, I look at STEM like a creation of knowledge that requires critical thinking to get there from here. Here's what I'm talking about. STEM to me means like biological STEM, where we learn how to cure cancer or develop a vaccine for COVID. Or it also means how we can build rocket ships to go to the moon. It means how we can do other kind of things, or build inventions out there, or build better concrete. So to me, this means it's more of a scientific endeavor than maybe a sociological format.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you address that?
So again,
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's no value to science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm simply saying those in power feel like it's more easy to organize and limit the range of thought of those who are taking those courses than it is if you put them in areas of study where they're encouraged specifically to become critical thinkers. So again, I'm not saying, and again, especially in the context of HBCUs and what I was saying that this former administrator was saying to me, the other part of his what he shared was, he said, I'm a physicist, but we don't teach theoretical physics here. We teach students here to run the machines for theoretical physicists once they get out into the world. So my point is, the goal, particularly at HBCUs apparently, particularly when it comes to targeting underserved communities, is not that STEM is going to lead them into some intellectual expansion, but that it's going to focus them specifically on tasks that will ultimately only serve the military-industrial complex. So, but again, I'm not making the argument. This is what I found in Dr. Jelani Favor's book about what those in power were saying about where they're directing their funding. So again, my point isn't to debate whether or not STEM is of value, and I'm not here I'm not a science denier. I mean, I love science. I'm a big science guy. I love science. What I'm saying is those in power are using science in ways that we are maybe not wanting them to be used, or they're encouraging, or they feel like that is going to produce better results vis-a-vis black people not becoming radical.
We teach theoretical physics and analytical physics here. And you're talking about people to do those kinds of things. Design an electric engine car. Somebody has to design it, and somebody has to critically think of their whole idea.
I'm not saying there's no critical thought in STEM. I feel like I'm.
Where are you, Steve? Dr. Jared Ball's anti-student.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Who asked what am I saying? Okay. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not trying to be smart. I don't know how to be more clear. I'm simply saying that if you look at some of the documents that are published in at least that one book, the argument was from those in power that STEM narrows people's thought. It is less likely to produce people who will join the Black Power or Black Liberation movement. That's all I'm saying. That's all. That was it. So from their perspective, and if you look at HBCUs, if you look at where most of the funding is going, I mean, this was part of what I was trying to say at the beginning, admittedly very quickly. much of what's happening in the academic environment is funding is going almost exclusively into these areas. It is not going into philosophy, psychology, history, black studies, women's studies. It's not going in those areas. And I'm suggesting, at least, that there is a political, in the context of what is the political purpose of education in the first place, I'm suggesting that there's a reason behind that.
STEM students are busy. STEM students are busy taking lots of math and lots of stuff. So
Sure.
It's a lot of work.
No doubt. And it might mean less time studying the political economy of the science that they're in, or studying what organizational work is happening. I mean, I get it. So this was not my intent to demean science. I think somebody behind you. Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead. That's all right.
Well, I wanted to get back to the kind of like the restructuring of capitalism, how we
Sure.
look at it. Where do you think is like the place where it starts? Is it in the workplace? Is it specifically in the workplace in academia, and then it shifts? Is it like, because our economy is like it's run by capitalism, it's everything fuels it.
Yeah.
And so like if the next like economic shift in our society, whenever that could potentially happen, were to be more socially, like more democratic, more socialistic, where do you think or that could potentially start?
It's a good question. I mean, so again, I don't generally think, and if I understand you correctly, I don't generally think that people who work within academia are more or less powerful or capable of challenging capitalism than any other workforce. So, for instance, I was just thinking as you were raising the question, admittedly, for whatever reason, he won't come on my show, but Professor Richard Wolff is a brilliant economist, and his argument is, I'm sorry?
I read his book.
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant. And so then and I thought I heard it even in what you were saying, that his argument is that the workforce, the workplace, if it was a democracy, should look and operate like a democracy, as opposed to bosses, employees, and so on. So that shows you the true nature of our societies, as I understand his point. So anywhere workers are is where they can challenge that structure, which, as I understand his argument, would be the beginning of an anti-capitalist movement, or at least part of. So that was part of the logic for me behind why I'm willing to support and try to help people in my state unionize. We can't even collectively bargain, and within the HBCU structure, which is not even in the state system itself, we even have less protection from the vagaries of administration, et cetera, and so forth. So, yeah, but wherever working people are would be my unfortunately vague and insufficient answer. But I mean, that's the initial, I don't know, that frontline conflict to democratize the workplace.
Supporting people just being more educated on what social or democratic workplaces could look like, and then like really starting to, it's like weird to incorporate capitalism into that, but like supporting businesses that support unions and like getting more people aware of that. And I feel like that.
And that's why, as I understood his argument, if we do that, it will become clear capitalism can't survive that. So, yeah, go ahead.
This is just a general question, but what advice would you give a city college student that is interested in this type of field, or specifically on what you study? What would you give them to be able to start to make that small change?
I'm glad you asked that, because that was supposed to be part of my conclusion that I forgot. Part of the reason why I was trying to share a little bit of my own experience is because I just want you all to be less naive than I was. Even at the time, I thought I was the stereotypical light-skinned dude doing too much, thinking he's going to be the revolutionary and bring it. Like I was doing too much. But I would want you to be a little bit more aware about the environment you're going into, and it is going to be a struggle. There will be direct and indirect consequences to you taking certain political positions in your work academically, vis-a-vis supporting other colleagues. I mean, the academic environment is shady. It is as shady as any other institutional or any other workforce that you would find. So just be aware of that, and then do the best you can to make what decisions are right for you. I mean, there are situations where you will find yourself with a good chain of command, where your chair, your dean, your provost president is where you want them to be. But most often that's not going to be the case, especially the more to the left that you go. Despite all the fantasies and mythologies about what academia is, it is not some liberal, radical, playground. So that would be it. I mean, that was really, so I was just, so in other words, they would say, stay away from insert doctor, your name there, because they radicalize students. And as proud of that as I am, and as much as I claim it, there are consequences to it. And some of them I didn't see. Like what happened just this past week. I mean, it was so subtle and shady. But it was like, wow, dang, I never would have seen that coming. So that would be it. And join organizations so that you find space outside of the institution for your intellectual and political life that will sustain you, because most institutions aren't here for that. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
Well, so I'm here, so I think I'm meant to be in this space.
All right.
And I'm just meshing together both the talks, and I start to wonder myself. I've gone through higher education for about 5 years now, and I feel like I stand on the shoulders of many generations of Latina and Hispanic women who have endured a lot of suffering for me to be able to stand where I am today. Unfortunately, there was, I guess, a reality check entering my last year as an undergrad student where I thought to myself, what's the point? What's the point of pursuing law? What's the point of even being a part of this society when it's so exhausting, so tiring, as a young person, just to wake up and realize that I really am an insignificant person in the grander scheme of things. And in that sense, I was disillusioned, and I stepped away from what was my original desire in becoming a legislator myself. And so I share that because the truth is a lot of us are tired. And the truth is, like, I think I'm not alone when I say, why the fuck should I do anything? And so I want to share that and allow you the space to just, whatever.
No, I appreciate that, and I hear you. My wife's law school, one of her law school professors said one day, the cost of law school isn't made intentionally high, as he said, as a conspiracy to make sure that lawyers can't take their degrees and do work for the people, that they would have to sell themselves to corporations and Wall Street, et cetera, and so forth. So maybe in the grand scheme of all the expansion of the universe, would I suggest that you or I are insignificant, but not in terms of our struggle in life here. So I wouldn't want you to ever feel like you're insignificant on that level. You know what I mean? I did mean that as a joke, like in terms of expanding universe, but you're not insignificant. All right. So and what has always helped me is that when I'm conscious of that, what is happening is done by design. It emboldens me, because you are supposed to want to quit. I was told directly by a former dean, if I can't fire those of you with tenure, I will make you want to quit. And he did. He did. But every day that I was like, damn, I'm ready to, no, because it just became like a childish, almost petty, like I'm just going to show up and do my job just because he wants me to quit. And I'm going to do it well. And maybe the end result is students have a great time and I'm a great professor, but I'm only doing it because he wants me to quit. So it's like that. It becomes. But I do want to encourage you to, like, that is the goal. You're supposed to feel that way. It is not crazy for you to feel that way. It is not an accident. Billions of dollars and decades of research have gone into organizing a situation to make you feel that way. In the most powerful society ever. You have to think of it because it is true. The most powerful society in the history of the world has organized its institutions to have that impact. So of course it's going to happen. Of course there's always going to be days where this is it. The next one, I'm turning the furniture over. This is it. Call the bail. This is it. I'm out. But then it's supposed to be that way. So then we have to just become more intentional about what we're going to do to change that. And again, I don't have an answer other than join organizations, and that's where they'll be, And there'll also be spaces where if nothing else, they'll be able to sustain you a little bit. You can't lean entirely on these institutions for everything, because they will pull the chair out. That's what that's. So I'm sorry to hear that, but it is by design. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yes.
And this will be the
Oh.
last question. I'm
Oh,
hoping.
okay, my
after-
bad. Right, sorry, yeah.
We're actually okay. Some people might start running out
Okay.
just because of their classes. But I'd like to answer the question, and if you could also bring, I Mix What I Like and some of the other places that you recommend people follow before we leave, that'd be great too.
Sure. I mean, I Mix What I Like for everything. Black Power Media, thanks everybody. If you got to go, peace if you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, thank you very much for coming. And if we do have more time, I'm down for whatever.
If you do go, do so very quietly, because there's one more question he's going to be answering. We have the room itself for a little while longer, so there's not a huge rush.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm happy to stay with
Keep it
you.
down, folks, please. Did the question disappear?
No, I've got it. So what book have you gifted most and why?
What book have I gifted most and why? Man, that's going to be a little bit of you know what? If I think about the book I've given away as a gift the most, it would be Ricky Vincent's book on funk. On funk music. And I forgot the subtitle, but Ricky Vincent is out here. He's a California guy, former Black Panther Party, history of music, and he wrote this book about the history of funk. And hailing from, as the drummer of Mama's Biscuits, the greatest funk band in Western Maryland between 1997 and 1999, I used to give that book out all the time because it brings like an African-centered look that connects all of this music that really explains the one. And if people will forgive me, there is one of my favorite quotes in it where he says, forgive me everybody, it's a little bit, but he said, trying to explain funk is like trying to write down your orgasm. And I just thought that, anyway, Ricky Vincent, check that out. Yeah. The line is trying to explain funk music is like trying to write down your orgasm. And I was like, that's a pretty provocative way of putting the point. Anyway, if we have to be over, I mean, thanks. I appreciate you all very much.